This man, Alex Hitchens, who goes by the name Hitch, follows a woman who is taking her dog back to her apartment. Hitch sets his bag down and opens it to reveal a dog inside. He takes it out, and the woman's dog runs outside just when the lift door closes. He carries the dog out the building and hands it to another man and walks away. The man has already arranged a taxi and lays down in front of it. The woman comes running out and thinks that the guy had just saved her dog from being hit by the car, and that's how they got together. Hitch goes around teaching his principles to other men who sought his help in getting their woman. Our next character, who goes by the name Sarah Milos, works as a gossip columnist. She enters office talking to her colleague, who asks why she is back at the office. Her boss cuts in telling her that she is too much of a workaholic and that she needs to go back. Just then, Sarah reveals that she got proof of the Sweden prince cheating on his fiancée, who is a famous celebrity. Her boss is flabbergasted and accepts that it is okay for her to be back at work and asks her to get back to him with the finished article. Later at night, Hitch is with his friend Ben, who confronts him for only looking toward short-term goals. Hitch points out that not everyone is lucky like him to be married to the love of their life. Ben mentions how Hitch too will get the chance to meet the love of his life, and on hearing that, Hitch thinks back about the past when he met Cressida Baylor back in college. They got together soon, and Hitch fell in love with her, but to his shock, he soon caught her cheating on him. He confronts her, asking what he did wrong, and she left him, and that is how he became the man that he is now. At the same time, Sarah is at the bar with her friend Casey, who shares that earlier, when she was shopping for some thongs, she came across a really sweet guy. Sarah asks what the guy was doing there, and Casey reveals that the guy came in to buy something for his mother. Sarah says that he is not the right guy since he was hitting on her while buying lingerie for another woman. Casey intends to accept the mother story and doesn't want to end up like Sarah. Seeing that her friend is crazy, Sarah asks for the guy's name to look him up, but Casey doesn't oblige. Moving on, we meet Albert Brenneman, looking at the article about the Sweden guy and Allegra. Albert, a clumsy guy working at an investment firm. Hitch mentions that he is his next client, and with his business being 100% referral, it helps him being untraceable. He finds Albert and observes how clumsy he is before he approaches him. Hitch asks him about the woman, and Albert reveals that she is a client for his firm, and that she is Allegra Cole. Hitch is shocked to discover who she is and that her last boyfriend is Sweden Noble. Albert mentions how she is the love of his life, and that he doesn't feel good that she is not happy now. With how Hitch looks at him, Albert thinks that he aiming far too high and decides to leave. But right then, Hitch stops him, saying that he out of his mind, but still he has decided to help him. Hitch soon starts his work by gathering info on her, and on the day, Allegra with Albert's firm, he follows her in. Allegra meets with her board and mentions how she wants to invest on her friend Maggie's new venture, but the head of the team rejects her idea. Albert thinks back to the training he got from Hitch and speaks up at the meeting. Looking at Allegra's dejected face, he speaks up how Allegra should invest in whatever she wanted since it is her money. He goes on around, and in the heat of the moment he says he quit and walks out of the room. Hitch is waiting for him there and asks how it went. Albert reveals how he screamed at his boss and quit his job. Hitch goes crazy hearing what Albert just did and tries to calm him down, and right then, Allegra comes knocking at his door. Hitch advises his actions while she thanks Albert for speaking up for her. She wants to meet with him later in the weekend and hands him her number. After she leaves, Albert faints on the spot. That night, Hitch is at the bar, and Sarah, waiting there, catches her eye. He asks the bartender about her and learns that she is a regular there and decides to approach her. Right then, another guy drops in to hit on her. Sarah clearly rejects him, but seeing that guy is not backing off, Hitch drops in to help her. He sits down to introduces himself as Alex and tries to start a conversation with her. Looking at his different approach, Sarah introduces herself as well, but doesn't give the right signals. Reading those, Hitch mentions that it was a pleasure meeting her and decides to leave. Sarah is taken aback, and as she is watching him leave, her friend Casey walks in. The next day, Hitch walks into a restaurant to meet Vance Munson, his prospective client. Hitch immediately gets on his work and asks Vance about the woman. Vance mentions that he met her when he was buying lingerie for another woman. Vance goes on and on about how she is on his mind, and in the end, Vance mentions that he must absolutely do the deed with her. This comes out as a big shocker for Hitch, and he clearly points out that is not what he does and decides to leave. Vance stops him, but Hitch puts him down and makes sure that Vance understands that he rejects helping him. In the next scene, Sarah receives a parcel and she opens it to find a walkie-talkie and hears Hitch's voice mentioning how he had to contact her since she did not give him her number. Her colleagues are surprised to hear the conversation, and Hitch goes on to invite her on a date during the weekend. Her colleagues insist that she agree, and he goes off, and just then, the delivery guy hands her another parcel. Sarah opens the box to find a diving suit. Soon, we jump on to the date, and Sarah meets with Hitch at the designated spot. Hitch mentions that she gear up, and soon they get on their water bikes and they start racing. But soon, Hitch's bike turns off and she calls out to her, and as she gets back to him, Hitch gets on her bike but accidentally kicks her face, dropping her in the water. He jumps in and apologizes to her. They end up in Ellis Island, where Hitch has arranged a private tour for her with the help of the guard there. They look around, and after a while, Hitch takes her back. Sarah mentions that she had a good time except the fact that he kicked her in the face. Hitch apologizes and looks forward for their next date. That night, Sarah meets with Casey to share how the date went, and Casey is surprised to hear how Sarah is willing to go on a second date with him. Coming back to Albert, Hitch calls Allegra and hands the phone to Albert. Hitch guides Albert in changing the plan for their meeting. Hitch watches Albert acting all clumsy, as Albert manages to invite her to a fashion exhibition that night, and her friend Maggie might also be interested. Allegra thinks that is a great idea and accepts to meet him there. Albert waits for her at the studio, and the reporters are surprised to find Albert taking her in. We switch between Albert's time getting trained by Hitch to handle different scenarios that he might come across at the event. Just like that, Allegra introduces Albert to two friends of Maggie, and they don't come off good, and Albert stands out for her and manages to get her interest. Moving on, Hitch reminds Albert that spotlight for the day should be on her friend Maggie. At the event, Albert is shocked to learn that Maggie is a guy, and remembering the training with Hitch, Albert executes his plan. Maggie takes an interest in Albert as well, and moving on the next thing, Hitch mentions that Albert should be ready to hit the dance floor if needed, and asks Albert to show him what he got. But Hitch goes speechless watching Albert move and shows him how Albert should move. Albert tries hard to move as Hitch guided him, but when Allegra turns around, Albert goes back to his usual style and the reporter takes a picture. The event went well, and in the morning, Sarah is shocked to find articles about Allegra and Albert in other newspapers. Her boss is definitely not happy about her missing the whole thing. At the same time, Hitch mentions that he is not happy with how he was caught with her. And moving on, Hitch tells Albert that their next plan involves Albert kissing Allegra, but Albert is totally not ready for it. Hitch asks him to show how he will do it, and drills him hard that Albert dives to actually kiss Hitch. Hitch gets crazy and storms off, saying that is not what he is supposed to do. Meanwhile, Sarah meets with her contact who was involved in the event and asks why she didn't let her know if she invited Allegra, but she tells her that the tickets were arranged by a guy named Alex Hitchens. Realizing who that might be, Sarah heads back her office to call Hitch, while her boss is on her tail. She thanks him for the date the other day and invites to meet that night. They meet at the planned time, and she reveals that her boss and his wife is there as well. They get together for a cook-off event, and Hitch mentions that he is going to stop talking after he learns that her boss's wife is a psychiatrist. But then, her boss asks Sarah to ask about the event, and giving in to his insistence, Sarah asks Hitch about Albert and Allegra. Hitch manages to brush it off, and right then they are offered a dish the chef has prepared that day. As they continue with their questions, the boss's wife points out that he might have food allergy. Seeing his swollen ear, Sarah takes Hitch to the pharmacy but is shocked to find his whole face swollen. Hitch goes crazy after finding the state of his face. Later, Sarah walks back with him, and since he drank a lot of medicine and him in an intoxicated state, Sarah asks him about Albert and Allegra. He just mentions that he loves so much and he is not going to mention anything more. Sarah takes Hitch to her place and they spend time talking about their past as they kind of get close to each other. They fall asleep, and in the morning, Sarah goes crazy thinking he left. But right then, Hitch walks in with tea for her to drink. Before they head their separate ways for work, Sarah leans in and they kiss each other. Hitch feels it for the first time as they head their separate ways. But Sarah comes across Casey and learns that she went on a date with Vance Munson. Casey also mentions that it was a bad idea, and since they did the deed and the guy ditched her. Casey also mentions that Vance mentioned date doctor. Hearing that Sarah is interested and decides to look for Vance, Sarah immediately asks her about the date doctor and threatens Vance that she will write an article about him. Giving in to this, Vance mentions that he doesn't know his name and hands her a card. Sarah leaves after kicking him in the balls. At this time, Hitch is with Albert, who is getting his back waxed. He calls Sarah to arrange another date. Moving on, we find Albert and Allegra at the game. Sarah, who got the info from Hitch, is ready to cover them this time and manages to take their picture. After the game, Albert takes Allegra home and he thinks about Hitch's training and leans in for a kiss but decides to walk away, but changes his mind and walks back to her and leans in for a kiss. Allegra too leans in, and after they kiss, Albert walks over happily dancing on the road. The next day, Sarah is with her team and seems like they are planning to cover a story on the date doctor. The photographer takes the picture of Hitch talking to their colleague. Sarah takes the camera from him and is shocked to find that Hitch is the date doctor. Her boss asks her once again, checking if she is willing to go on with the article. She mentions that she is okay with it and moving on to their next date. Sarah meets Hitch at his home for dinner. Hitch finds her acting odd. Sarah confronts him, saying she knows who he is and what he does. Sarah leaves immediately, and in the morning, Hitch walks in with the doorman asking for guidance. Hitch is not sure of why he is asking him, and the guy hands him the newspaper with the article of him helping Albert get Allegra. Hitch is shocked, and at the same time, Albert finds the article as well and gets hysterical, vandalizing the stall. Hitch looks for Sarah at her home, but seeing that she is not in, he calls Albert, who is getting arrested for what he did. At night, Sarah and Casey attend a speed dating event, and Hitch apprehends Sarah there. Sarah says that what Hitch is doing is wrong. They go off against each other, distracting the others. One of the guys identifies Hitch and Casey comes off at him for Vance. Hitch understands after hearing his name, and makes it clear that he refused to work with him, and it is mainly because of guys like him that he is doing what he does. Sarah feels bad for ruining him, and their days go by. Sarah finds Hitch and apologizes, but Hitch makes it clear that he's got nothing more to talk with her. Later, Albert comes to meet Hitch and asks him to fix it. Albert mentions that he feels miserable not being able to be with Allegra. Hitch goes off based on his past, and hearing his words, Albert walks off, deciding to go after Allegra by himself. But as soon as he gets to her place, Allegra leaves and he goes after her. Meanwhile, we find that Allegra has come to meet with Hitch. He makes it clear that his actions are only to create opportunities for Albert. Hitch comes to realize that he did nothing to help Albert. Allegra feels happy to hear it and hugs Hitch, only for Albert to show up right then. He thinks that this was Hitch's plan the whole time and decides to fight him. Allegra mentions that Hitch came here for him and kisses him. Hitch feels happy to see them go at it, and he too decides that he's got somewhere he should be. He heads over to Sarah's place and decides to get it all out. He's got not the right words while seeing her face and asks her to close the door. So with her out of the way, Hitch goes on to mention how he really feels about her. Sarah opens the door for him, and Hitch finds another guy walking out from her house. Hitch just couldn't believe her, and seeing her walk away, Hitch is broken apart again. Seeing her walk away, Hitch doesn't accept it and decides to go after, and they end getting together. Right then, Sarah introduces him to her sister, and the guy was actually her sister's husband. We soon find Albert and Allegra getting married, and at the event, an old lady helps Casey get together with her grandson. We find the old lady signaling Hitch, and this was his plan as well. The movie comes to a close with Albert going off on the dance floor, and they are joined by Hitch and Sarah. And that is it for this movie called Hitch from 2005. Subscribe and comment down below, and I shall see you in the next one. Until then, this is your host for Movie Recap, signing off.